Hi there. My name is Emmett Wemp, and I'm a candidate for the EdTech Master's Degree program from Boise State University. And many of the courses that I took throughout the time in this master's program, many of those courses actually helped me to create lessons and curriculum that I could use in my classroom right after I took the class. Some good examples I'm going to show you in this video of some artifacts that I created in different courses that I was then actually able to implement into classes, or think about my students as I was creating these lessons. So one of the cool projects that I got to do in the EdTech program was actually in EdTech 541. In EdTech 541, we actually had to create an interactive presentation. So the basis behind this interactive presentation is that as you work through the presentation, it has you work in different pieces and parts. And so what I chose to do is an introduction to circuit theory. So I used some outside resources in the presentation in order to allow the user to go through some of the learning material and then actually uh, work with the material while they were learning about it. So this created sort of an asynchronous environment, and it was kind of the introductory environment where the learner could be getting some new information, and they can actually take that information and view it at their own pace, and then determine if they had done it correctly or not, and then kind of move through. So the foundation of an online learning environment and a virtual learning environment, I felt, was kind of started in this particular project. And so the students would go through, and as they clicked on pieces, they would start to learn about electronic circuits, and they would see a series circuit and a parallel circuit. And these are screen grabs from a simulation software that they would use. So as the student progressed through, they would get some key terms, and then they would see an example of a series circuit. So in this slide, they're going to go ahead and try building a series circuit. And then by clicking on the picture, it actually takes you out and throws you into the PhET simulation environment. So in this situation, it's asking me, okay, let's try it out, and it wants to know, it's like a little quiz. What is the current in this circuit? And the way that I've got this set up is that you can click on one of these, and it will tell you if, oh, I'm sorry, but that's the wrong answer. So click here, try again. It brings you back. So the student would have to go through and calculate this and then choose the correct answer, and eventually keep calm because you're correct. So there you go. So that was the right answer. I've been able to use this presentation and just embed it into my classroom website, where students could then go on here and work through some of this stuff some more. So here we are in EdTech 521, and this is an asynchronous lesson that I'll be showing you as another one of my artifacts. This particular one is about thermal energy. It starts out with the equation on thermal energy, and then the students would work through some of the learning targets on their own, or not necessarily on their own. They would have my help, but they wouldn't be synchronous. They wouldn't be at the same time. And so this would be something that a distance learner could do on their own without having to actually be in the room. One of the cool things that I was able to do with this particular project is then not only do I have a lesson that a student could use if they aren't there on the day that we're talking about thermodynamics, but it's also open to the public. So you have students coming in that aren't all necessarily my students, and they're pulling these up and able to work through these problems. One of the neat things about the online environment is that if it's an open environment, like this one is, where it's easily searched and people can have access to it, students can actually run through it and work through it without being part of your class. Then I've included a virtual experiment so that students can actually go through and create an experiment that they could do in home without necessarily having to be in the lab or in the classroom. And they're to go out and find materials and see how well that material insulates against the loss of heat. So how good of a heat conductor is it? So basically, this is a asynchronous lesson that I was able to do, and students can actually use this outside of the classroom time. So, for instance, if you're not in office hours, you wouldn't necessarily have to be there to help the student individually with the particular project. So in EdTech 523, I created a online lesson, and what it deals with is 3D modeling on a computer. So if you wanted to create an object in 3D, you could go through this lesson. Interesting backstory to this lesson. I've had a number of students outside of my classroom using it. I've had a number of my actual students using it, and I got an email about 3 months after I created this unit from a what I thought was a student in Louisiana. Turns out it was an intern at a design firm that was working and trying to learn how to use the 3D modeling software, and she had actually just found this kind of walkthrough and was working through it, and so she was asking me for some more details on the drawing so that she could do some more work on it. So it was kind of interesting that from this lesson that I created in the EdTech program, I was actually able to not only implement it in my own classroom, but it became a learning tool for people outside of my own classroom. People I didn't even know, and I didn't even know were using it. So that kind of demonstrates the power of the online tools. So if we go through this, I'm not going to go through the whole entire thing, but there's some key points. One of them I wanted to point out was a conference room. I called it a conference room. It's really just like a forum area where students can go in and they could actually create help questions, and they could work through stuff together. So the idea being very similar to how we have it in our EdTech program, where students can actually go in and work through pieces. I can, as the instructor, I can post things. It's basically just a little forum. Then it goes through, and there's 6 lessons and an assessment. So lesson 1 is the interface. This is a video that I pulled off of YouTube. This is not my video, and it just kind of works through. Basically, it's provided by Autodesk, and it just starts out with the interfaces. So lesson 2 would be creating project files. Again, it's got an embedded video. So then basic sketching, they're going to start creating parts. Again, another embedded video, and then some tasks. So there's a couple of tasks to do. So submitting screenshots into the conference room for people to share how they're doing so far. So once they've worked through all that, then they should be able to pop into the assessment that I showed you earlier. They'd be able to pull this up, and they'd be able to 3D model a simple item from home. So the way that this was working for students is then I actually used this particular lesson in my second level class for students that had bypassed the first level class, and one of the components that they had for college credit is they had to be able to do 3D modeling. And so there you have it. There's some artifacts that I felt encompassed my EdTech experience. All the classes kind of culminated to help me create some pretty solid lessons and some pretty solid processes. Any of those lessons, the content is not what's important. What's important is the process of how it was put together. Any of those lessons could be translated into any other course in an online environment. I invite you to go ahead and take a look at my portfolio, where there's a lot more artifacts linked in, and I'll link that at the bottom of the video. And thank you for viewing my presentation.